escalations are often long calls too, so if you've got an 8-minute call, you're listening for 8 minutes, you have to pay attention for 8 minutes, and you have to be writing notes for 8 minutes. Balto pulls up the transcript, and I can peruse the transcript in probably 90 seconds.
Bettina, hey, so good to see you. Offline, you were just saying you had a funny story about a Balto swag y'all got.
Yeah, absolutely. This summer we were up on holidays at the cottage, and my grandson has my Balto hat. So, and I didn't notice that he'd taken it up on holidays. And all of a sudden, the kids decided they needed tattoos. And so they were drawing all over themselves, snakes and airplanes and things like that. And I looked at my grandson, and he was wearing his Balto cap. And on his hand, he had the Balto logo as his tattoo. And then I looked over
Yes.
at his little buddy, and he also had a Balto tattoo. But his was an earlier iteration and was not considered quite as attractive or as
Uh-huh. Uh, actually one year it was I think it was our holiday party. We had a whole bunch of the the slap-on Balto tattoos. If we have any of those available, I think I know where I can send one.
Yeah, exactly. And I can tell you it will be used.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really funny because they had no idea, because it doesn't say Balto on it. They dig the logo.
So Bettina, tell us, who is Credit Control Corporation and what do you all do?
Credit Control Corporation is a Virginia-based collections agency. It's been in business around 60 years, started as a mom and pop shop. They found a particular niche market in medical collections and utility. Over the years, it expanded nicely. They were able to fill the space really well, and they've become both first party and third party medical collections providers for a number of large hospital systems within the sort of, I guess, Virginia Triangle, or I think it's called, or the Triad. I'm not exactly sure. And in the meantime, 2 years ago, we were purchased by a man named Paul Leary, who is now our CEO. Mostly we're based in Virginia, but we're looking to expand out into other markets. We have a combination of first party work where we work directly with the hospital systems to help them resolve their balances in a quicker fashion. And we also have a third party piece that requires a little bit more, what do you call it, elbow grease.
Yeah.
help them with their accounts receivables management.
Yeah. Before we jump into Balto stuff, you had some interesting thoughts, off air about how first party and third party collections are changing and how the market is evolving. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you're seeing in the collections industry overall right now?
We're finding that there's a fair bit of legislative pressure, not only just in Virginia, but you can see the appetite across the United States. The Affordable Care Act has had some, I don't know if they were unexpected or unintended, but it certainly had some financial consequences. It's driven up deductibles on the whole. It's reduced the co-insurance relationship, and it's also increased the basic monthly prices that people are paying for their basic medical insurance coverage. And that has created an environment where a lot of people are carrying more medical debt than they have before. So if a family of four has a deductible of $3,000 before their insurance even kicks in, and then the co-insurance is a 70-30 split, you can have fairly simple things happen that will put financial pressure on you. So I think that consumers have a voice, and they have contact with their congressmen, they have contact with their state representatives, and the kind of legislative response has been to remove the pressure of medical debt reporting. One of the recent changes was that it had to, once paid, it had to be removed entirely. Virginia, as an example, is an early adopter of not allowing it anymore to be credit reported at all. So if you're a service provider and you're looking to manage your accounts receivables, the pressure really is to try and get access to get those bills resolved, those balances resolved that are the patient responsibility sooner in that process. You really don't want to wait 196 months, 7 months before you're really starting to create that pressure to collect. It's much easier on your balance book if you can get it into the hands of first-party organizations like ourselves at 90 days post date of service or 90 days post insurance being paid on the balance, and us then taking over the legwork of making those frequent contacts and setting up payment arrangements. The sooner that money can be remitted back to the service providers, the healthier the system will stay.
And if we take those changes we're seeing and we zoom into the experience of the collector today, how are those market shifts changing the role and how the challenges that a collector who is, working to resolve a medical debt, with consumers, how does it change the challenges and the expectations they have?
Again, there's a big distinction between third party, which is often commissions based, and the kind of individuals who gravitate towards that work, and first party work, which tends to be the sort of the first serious job after your MIC job at a fast food restaurant, where you come in with decent customer service skills and ability to work under pressure, and now you want an office job. And you want something that will increase your skill set, and you're looking for something a little bit more grown up. Anything at that point that helps an agent adapt very quickly to their environment is a net benefit to them. I think you're asking almost a Balto question, which is, like how do we make the job easier? The less pressure that an agent has to figure out every problem themselves, the more that they can have access to information that presents itself to them quickly. It means that we can keep the handle time low, we can handle more calls, and the agent has less stress trying to figure it all out themselves or combing through a large database of information looking for the answer that they're working on. I always say to my new hires, as an example, by the time you've done 3-4 days of training and you're getting them on the phones, and all the policies and procedures and learning how to use the system, there's a lot that's been crammed in a short period of time. And you'll learn how to take a payment pretty quick because you're going to be doing it 3, 4, 5 times a day. You're going to get that under your belt pretty fast. But somebody calling in dead isn't going to happen that often. And by the time it does, probably the only thing you'll remember in the first or second week of your employment is that that there's a policy and that there's a procedure. But what the heck it is, you probably aren't really sure of. So now you're either going back to your training materials, or hopefully you've designed a visual landscape, which is what we used to coach our agents to do, create a visual landscape in your workspace that you can look up immediately and find that direction. Because you've got a caller on the line who's providing information to you. You have a system in front of you that's providing information to you. And you're trying to process and evaluate everything that's happening. You have to stop and look for a policy or a procedure. You're either going to put the caller on hold. There's going to be a lot of animos, which is going to then kind of diminish your leadership capital at that point. And so we need environments that are quick, that are effective, and that reduce that stress pressure on agents, particularly when the phone rings all day long.
I really appreciate how vivid of a picture you're able to paint of what the experience is like to be a new agent talking to a consumer about an uncommon situation, not a never situation, but one that's a little more rare than something that happens every single time. How has Balto fit into the collector's life, and what kind of solutions have you seen Balto been able to provide for you guys?
One of the solutions that we saw pretty quickly was the speed of the new hire learning curve. And that evidenced itself in our AHT. So our agents, our new hires had an average handle time of about 8 minutes when they came in. And the first group that we put through after we had Balto, we saw a 2-minute improvement in handle time because they did not need to, particularly in a work from home environment, or even in the office, they did not need to stand there with deer in headlights looking around for somebody to answer answer their hand, which is like, somebody's dead and I don't remember what to do. Balto was able to provide those solutions for them and reduce the amount of hand holding that they needed. And the net benefit, of course, is AHT. We also saw an improvement in our QA. We wanted some additional visibility. And as we began the sales conversation with Balto and examined the product, the 100% recording was really attractive to us because it wasn't just visibility, but insight. The old QA pattern is you have some QAs and you listen to as many calls as you can in a day, and usually it's 2 per agent per week if you're lucky. And you have to choose a time frame too. You can't listen to 400 10-minute calls. You just don't have enough time. And often in quality assurance, we're listening to this sort of little tiny box here around 280 minutes, 4.5, 5 minutes, depending on what your handle time is. And all of the bits on the outside, the fluffy bits, the calls that are 90 seconds, the calls that are 10 minutes, a lot of your problems are probably sitting in those time frame boxes, but you can't get to them.
And what's so interesting about those 90-second calls is, in fact, if you're a QA analyst, you often use that as a heuristic of which calls not to listen to. Because
Yes.
if you have no idea what's happening on the call, you're like 90 seconds, probably, reached a third party, probably, not the right person, probably voicemail. And so you just go, you have a heuristic of, well, if I listen, that's gonna be a waste of time. So when there is a 90-second interaction where it's 90 seconds because the consumer totally blew up and the agent then needed to handle it appropriately, you don't have the information, and unless you have some sort of intelligence looking at that interaction saying, here's what this 90-second call was about.
Yes. And when you look at agent statistics, one of the reasons I love contact center work is that the statistical picture gives you the entire identity of an agent and you know where to look. So if your handle time, if you've got an agent with a really low handle time and a high transfer rate, as an example, you know that they're not very comfortable. And so they're throwing the dirty diaper over the fence. An agent with a much longer handle time, who then, as an example, also has a high transfer rate, well, they probably have navigation problems. They're not really sure of the policies and procedures. They're struggling, but they don't want to look bad. And they want to make some contribution to the caller. And in the end, they still dump the dirty diaper someplace else, right? So a tool like Balto allows us to take a deeper dive at some of those patterns because of the 100% call recording, because of the transcription, because of the opportunity to ask the AI as well, to aggregate what's happening there. You get additional insights that really the traditional manner would have been, I would have had to listen to them all. I would have noticed a pattern and then I would have to start to listen and write it all down, put it in an Excel sheet and figure out what the patterning was to it and then coach the patterning.
And can you think of an example of something that you might ask the AI or an insight that you have been able to pull from Balto?
Yesterday, I used the AI to ask how many times on a new line of business, how many times the consumer made a reference to receiving a statement as the reason why they were calling in. Because I wanted to measure, it's on behalf of a client, and I wanted to measure the efficacy. Because we know dialers, like if you run a dialer, we know that there's a certain response rate that you can expect. We know from manually placed outbound calls, there's a certain response rate. So we wanted to see what the response rate was. And the AI made that much easier for me because I just asked it and it told me 21 times.
I love that. And actually, I think you might be pleasantly surprised. We have a new feature coming out called Insights, which basically, you ask that exact question, how often were they, calling in after receiving a statement? And what we realize is, well, what if you ask the same question every single day over time and then tracked the changes over time? And what if you could go backwards and see if I had asked that question 6 months ago, what would it have been? So that's finally what we're building, where it'll do that and it'll actually show it graphically over time. It's in beta now, so I will actually talk to the team and see if I can get you in that beta.
Yeah, we love that idea because we have a number of ways of making contact. In third party, we use VoApps. They're direct drop voicemails. We have no contact with the consumer. The phone doesn't ring. It just drops right into their system. We send statements. We have people who sign up to agree to text communication and email communication. And so what you really need to, that's just in third party. In first party, we use agentless dialers, we use manual, where the agent leaves the voicemail themselves. We send out statements on some of our lines of business. And if our client's managing that and they're managing the contact strategies, it's really helpful to understand what prompts the consumer to call us. And so if you can track, and they'll always say, I just got a text message from somebody. I just got a voicemail from somebody named Vicky. So what we did as an example, we named all of our agentless voicemails with a gender neutral name that's specific to the client identity. And so that the agent knows when they're getting it, when they say, Rick just called me, they know that that's a voicemail left by the system because we don't have an agent with that name. And so if we can capture that, then you can begin to measure. This is a very useful piece of data for us because then you can begin to measure what contact strategies are most cost effective. What drives the biggest result? And then pushing your work, your contact attempts into the cheaper buckets. Letters cost the earth. So anytime we can use text messaging, email, those opt-in options, VOAPs, understanding what drives that consumer contact is exceptionally valuable information to us. And oftentimes our ARM systems are not sophisticated enough yet to track all of those different contact approaches. So you would be adding something pretty valuable to us.
I'd love to hear your supervisors and your QA team. Today, what is their use of Balto look like? How are they engaging with the system?
The easiest way and the funnest ways that we're using it, and we have applied it for ourselves, is number one, building playbooks that are unique to certain lines of business. It's allowed us to take on adjunct business for some of our clients and then very quickly onboard it because we don't have to spend a lot of time in one-on-one training. We shorten our training time and then they can use the policies and procedures placed in that playbook specific to that line of business. That's been very helpful to us. We developed a QA scorecard, which gives us in-depth visibility into our checklist and some agent behaviors that we're tracking, and we're able to provide that forward into our agent population, and also it directs then the supervisor coaching. And then we'll do things like look at the scoring and see something. If somebody's coming in 0 at recap the whole time, as an example, oftentimes that's a language pattern. And we've constructed Balto in one way. They haven't created a customization for themselves, and they're leaving points on the table that could potentially contribute to their bonus success. And so we have that visibility and we know where to coach. We know I can see if they're not asking for the money. Oftentimes they're agents who struggle with the legitimacy and the authority associated with asking for the money, or they're overly empathetic. And that helps us drive that conversation because the content is there. The other thing we really like is Call Explorer. Call Explorer, you got a client who says to you, what the heck happened on this call? Or you have an agent complain about another agent. Call Explorer, it allows you to quickly pull up a transcript, examine the score, examine the content of the call, and coach it pretty quickly. We've used it to flip over both the calls and the export of both the calls and the transcript itself to our client when they were sometimes examining internal issues or broad escalations.
One of the patterns I'm hearing is something that our most successful customers do, and that is following the thread. When you mentioned that the agent isn't asking for the balance, well, you then are following the thread and saying, well, why is that? Does it have to do with their empathy? Does it have to do with their credibility building? And that's like absolutely the right way to think about what this intelligence can do. Is it's going to point a spotlight at something and then say, human intelligence, please take over and look here. And
Hmm.
it sounds like you apply a very similar process, with Call Explorer, where, there's some interaction that either your client highlights or that an agent highlights, and you're able to go through and review that and it sounds like in less time.
Oh,
Have you,
absolutely.
yeah, can you talk
You
about the
can.
time savings? Like, what have you noticed there?
Sure. I mean, if you're particularly, I mean, escalations are often long calls too, So if you've got an 8 minute call, you're listening for 8 minutes. You have to pay attention for 8 minutes and you have to be writing notes for 8 minutes. Balto pulls up the transcript and I can peruse the transcript in probably 90 seconds. And in fact, I can pinpoint which sections I want to listen to by queuing up the various elements, and it'll play it for me and play just that section, and it'll show me, it'll highlight it in the transcript, the portion that I'm listening to. I can click on it and connect it into the score, if I'm doing that check and double check in that regard. But it speeds up the whole process. I can read a number of, and in fact, just on this new line of business, that really just started to launch some volume in the past week. We looked at Friday and said, okay, what kind of conversations are happening in this space, and what are consumers saying to us? And I did the analysis on 34 calls, which doesn't sound like a lot, but would have been probably a 6 hour exercise if I had to listen to them. I just used the summary that you guys provided in Call Explorer. So, and then when I now using the summary is not a cheat, because you then look at the summary and you go back into the transcript, but it helps you identify where you want to look and
Yeah.
removes the extraneous bits, the the information that's not really relevant. There's a lot of information exchanged on any agent interaction, including sometimes my dog died. So I don't need to know that part. And so the summary is very, very useful, and then also directs me back into the transcript itself. And so I was able to produce a solid analysis that we shared with the client, probably in 2 hours instead of almost all day.
It's easy to, until you've experienced it, underappreciate how useful the summary can be. And someone who, isn't used to it, just think, what's the difference between going into a call totally blind and you
Hmm.
go in and you have a play button, you're like, all right, let's see what this is, and you hit play.
Yeah, yeah,
It's that versus
yeah.
going in and seeing a full picture of this is what happened in this interaction. So you're primed. You have the context. You're like, you're not surprised by what's coming. And
No.
I think that that's like, there's an efficiency lever there that can be tough to appreciate until you've actually like experienced it.
Well, it depends too what your purpose is at the time. For a general QA, there is still value to listening to the telephone call because tone enters into it. And while Balto can make some suggestions about tone, often you need the human ear to confirm whether or not it's an issue. But in this case, I was really trying to understand, both for the sake of my agents, because so far the project is spiking with a pretty high handle time. The callers are pretty wily. And we have to start to look for solutions to drive that handle time back down again. So I need to know what's happening and why. My client, who has thrown a bunch of statements out at their consumers, knows that it's not going to be a happy time for these consumers, also wants to know whether or not that process has even been efficacious, because they've spent money towards that process. And it's like, well, what are the returns? How much money are you getting back? What are the impediments to collecting on those balances?
Yeah.
And listening to every call to get it to try and sort itself out, um, because then you have to create the categorization in order to be able to run a pivot table on it or anything else. I have to say this call is about X, and the summary allowed me to do that very, very quickly, because I read the summary, looked at the transcript where I needed to, and I said, okay, this is an insurance issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to categorize it and say, how long are these insurance issues taking? Well, they're taking on average 12 minutes. Okay, I'm going to have to figure out a way to shortcut that process for my agents to get
Yep.
quicker to the end result.
And Bettina, I don't know if you know this yet. We actually released the capability to customize the various things that Balto Note Taker is looking for. So if you wanted to, you could say, please tell me which of the following 12 categories this call best fits into. and you can actually put that in the note taker. So every call when it comes up will show you the summary, and it also show you, main issue, insurance issue, or it'll show you which it'll do the categorization for you.
Well, I have a meeting with Claudia next week, so
Yeah.
I don't have a notepad with me because we were having. Yeah, you're gonna have to text me that later.
Yeah.
I
I'll make sure she gets this too. That'll be awesome.
Yes, please. Yes,
Yeah.
because I want to know all about that. Because
Super
again,
cool.
what's in my volume drives where my coaching is focused. It's not just about good agents and bad agents, and that the weaker agents may have knowledge gaps, and I need to coach what they know and improve that knowledge gap. It's also what is happening in my volume. What kind of concerns are consumers presenting? Because then you maybe have to do up training on the whole process, particularly if you're trying to maintain AHT. It's an industry where time is money. So that's I like this idea.
Can you think of any roadblocks that you've experienced? Something that wasn't working quite like you hoped, where you and the Balto team had to put your heads together and fix some sort of challenge?
Yes. So I was I think as a corporation we're some of your early adopters of this technology, and I struggled intellectually to really begin to understand how the AI worked. And so I was probably one of the prime resistors. I couldn't quite figure out, because I was stuck in this headspace of quality assurance and how you measure the quality of a call. And if I don't know the caller is handling it, the agent's handling it correctly, how do I, it's like, if a tree falls in the forest and you don't hear it, how do you know, right? How do you know it's closed? So it wasn't that easy. And one of the things that we struggled with was the dynamic prompts. And I've spoken to other people who've utilized your tool, and that's the effectiveness of the dynamic prompts. You can write a beautiful dynamic prompt, and I have. And we found that agents weren't using them. So I use a lot of very formal syntax, and I'm the writer half the time I was the writer of a lot of those prompts with dialogue and interaction from everybody, and they weren't using them. And so we looked at it, and we worked with Tyler, who was our customer success manager at the time, who was an outstanding companion in this.
Shout out to Tyler.
Yeah, he was outstanding. He was absolutely phenomenal. And he looked at the dynamic prompts, and we changed how we used them, because the agents were not using the feedback. I didn't need it for my quality assurance scores. And so we created some dynamic prompts that were essentially mini coaching exercises. Rather than say this, it was like, use these strategies. And we suggested some language. And it didn't become important to me anymore to see how the dynamic prompts in that sense were scoring in the system. It became more important to me to see the outcomes, which you will then see in collection and conversion rates. And so we use these dynamic prompts, and he really did some out of the box thinking. And we kind of rearranged entirely how we utilize them as this coaching. How do you, somebody says, I already got a statement. Well, they may or may not have. Like, you're going to have to untangle that declaration. They might have 11 pieces of paper in front of them, and the two of you are not even talking about the same one yet, right? And so how do you negotiate that to get the consumer into a cooperative frame of mind so that you can then start the collection opportunity? So he was excellent in that way. The other thing was the accuracy of the launch of the dynamic prompts. You have a lot of tools available to us. You've got the AI database, you've got the smart phrase triggers, and making sure the triggers fire accurately is one of the, to a degree, frailties, I think, within your system. We worked with Claudia, and she worked really hard with your back-end team to validate this launching and to make sure that they were connecting properly. Because if the agent gets one that's not connected to the content, they're very quickly going to dismiss. They don't have time to pay attention to it. And because the agent's got a lot to do, and they got a lot of screens going. So the legitimacy of the offered assistance, that valuation point is quick. And the agent will continue to use the assistance provided to them, provided that it's accurate. But if 3 times out of 4 it's not accurate, they are not going to waste the brain space, even the eye movement, to go back and check. So you have to, we worked with Claudia to really fine tune that, to make sure that we were firing dynamic prompts when we needed them for the correct subject matter.
Where is the accuracy today? And what sort of, you mentioned payment conversions. What sort of, effect have you seen on payment conversions?
I don't quite have the statistics for you in that
okay.
depth.
Whatever makes sense.
But I have a corollary comparison in that if you're not asking for the money, you're never going to get it. And Balto was able to show us really, really quickly that if you asked for the money, about 45% of the time you'd get it. The ask rate was about 40%, where consumers were where agents were making sure that they were asking for the money. And that was in the first period of time. And with a turn rate of about 31%. So 40% of the time they were asking for the money, and 31% of the time they then got it. Our current standing is closer to 51% of the time they're asking, and 37% of the time they're getting.
Let's talk about what has been different or special in partnering with Balto.
It's been awesome. Brian is my director of operations. He's been in the industry 30 years. I've been in the industry 20. We both agreed, and I mean this with no false flattery. We consider Balto probably be the best vendor we've ever worked with, hands down. There's a degree of responsiveness throughout your entire team. Every one of the people that we've interacted with has been really well trained, not only in their subject matter expertise, but also in the way that they present themselves. You must put them through some great corporate training, because there is a consistency in their approach. They're all very professional people, but they also have a lovely combination of lightheartedness, friendliness, openness, while understanding the professional relationship. They never get too relaxed, never too informal, but they're not stuffy or hard to interact with. And that's from the very beginning. We're talking Jim, who is your sales guy. Jim made a marvelous impression. Emilio, who helped us launch the project. Emilio's an awesome guy. He's easygoing. He's a quick thinker. Michelle, who provided training at the outset. Tyler, Claudia, your whole IT team when we need support, very responsive. They're fabulous. Again, Jim and Emilio, as an example, they gave us really like concierge treatment in the sense that they made us feel like we were your largest client, which I'm pretty sure that we're not. Yeah, there's a consistency in the delivery of the work product that you guys have, and it's been really impressive. It makes you guys a real delight to work with.
Bettina, thank you so much for that. And I'll let folks know like a little bit of how we do it. It actually starts with this document that we share with everyone when they join, and it's called How We Communicate at Balto. And it's 10 principles of communication, things like authentic, things like realistic, where we don't want folks to be like, Bettina, I just know the solution will be perfect for you. Because it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Let's put a reasonable doubt into things so we can come at any sort of conversation together as partners, rather than one person trying to get something from the other person. And so that's been a pretty awesome pillar of our company. And it's cool because like it applies internally in our internal meetings as well. You can feel that we all are just have like a common language, and it's great to hear that's coming out.
Your staff from beginning to end have presented themselves according to those values that you want them to imbue. And it creates a consumer experience that builds a great deal of trust. And Tyler and I, we would go at it pretty hard, because I'm like, Tyler, I needed to do this and it's not doing this. And Tyler, have you thought about this? And he was so steady, and he would push back appropriately. He's just like, no, the system can't do that. And it ended up creating a really strong, effective working partnership. And it stopped being Balto selling me a service. And basically, typically, you're just like, are you happy with your service? Why are you not happy with your service? You know, how can we be a better service? What else can we sell you? It was really like, this is an innovative product. It's a thought concept that's not easy to digest at the outset. I'm the subject matter expert. Let me help you understand. Let me understand what your needs are, and then let's work collaboratively for us to use the tool that I have available to you to work for your business needs. Oftentimes, the sales process is just, it is those basic questions. Are you happy with your service? Can I sell you something else? And it's just like, well, it works for everybody else. Why doesn't it work for you? This was a new product. This was, we all needed a headspace change. And one of my younger employees, she understood AI way better. And she would call me up and she's just like, you need to understand how an AI thinks. It listens, but it doesn't think, you know? And so Tyler was really good that way too. And Claudia really is as well. So it's not just their subject matter expertise, it's their client management. Your training process is outstanding.
Bettina, thank you so much for your time today and for joining me in this interview. This was awesome. We got a lot of good stuff, so really, really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.